This is Certified Sommelier John Allenus, and welcome to another edition of my Stories from a Better World. Because what goes well with wine? Stories, and I've got a pretty good one for you today. First off, the wine I'm drinking, it's a good California cab, local guy, Alex Andros. So this one's out of St. Helena. I'm going to have a little pizza later on tonight. So I'm not going to tell you this is a magical wine. This is pretty darn good wine to drink with food. So as I'm telling you this story, I'm going to drink a little wine because that's what we like to do. Wine and stories. Definitely got the pyroxenic feel of a California cab for all you wine nerds out there. So, let me get into my story. This is one that came from my sophomore year at the University of Texas. And I believe it was in either October, I think it was October 1990 because it was a little bit cool out there. I was living on the 7th floor of Jester. And I had gone down to see my roommate, the man D-Land. He was my roommate the prior year when we lived on the 11th floor at Jester. And his roommate Chris was down there, so I kind of went down just to see what they were doing. It was probably about 6 p.m. or so. So I went down there, and Chris had two friends that had come to see him. I don't know what their names were, but they were not students at UT, and they clearly weren't students at any college. Because what they thought college was all about was, if you go to college, you went to college to drink. So these are two guys that came to visit Chris because they had come to drink. And they had two things that they were very proud of in their possession. They had fake IDs. They were going to go down to 6th Street in Austin when it was a good place, and they were going to get into all the bars and clubs with their fake IDs. And the thing they were most proud of was they had a bottle of something called Diesel. Now, you may have heard of Everclear, but Diesel is a cheap version of Everclear. It's 190 proof, and it is some rough stuff. And so these guys hatched a plan where they were going to go to the bars and clubs, they were going to get them with their fake IDs, they were going to order a couple of mixed drinks so they could hang out and talk to girls, and then they were going to sneak their bottle of Diesel in, and they were going to add a little bit to each of the drinks. Now, I was an engineering student at the time, so I told these guys, I said, listen fellas, you guys don't understand how potent this stuff is. You guys are going to start drinking and lose track of how much you drank, and it's not going to be a very good night. And they kind of liked the idea. They thought I was egging them on. Maybe I was. So, off these guys go, these two kunkelheads with their fake IDs and their bottle of Diesel. And, you know, you would have thought that would have been the end of them. Well, later on that night, probably around 11 or so, I was studying. I was a serious student. I was studying, decided to stretch my legs and go down to the entrance to Jester. And what they would do was that the RA, the resident assistant, at around 10 p.m., they would close off access, meaning that you had to show your student ID to get in with a Jester sticker, or you had to be on the guest list to be let in. Because obviously they didn't want people like these two yokels coming in. Usually what we would do at Jester if we had friends over, we just open the stairwell, sneak them in, there were no cameras, none of that nonsense, and everybody was happy. But for whatever reason, I got very lucky when I went down there. So I went down, I was walking around, and also you have to understand behind the RA2, there was a UTPD officer. And UTPD was unfortunately known by everybody on campus as UTPD, because they weren't going to cure cancer anytime soon. They didn't have law enforcement power, but you know they could arrest rowdy students, they could call the real cops. They were more of a hassle than anything else. But on duty that night, there was this poor 5'2", sour-looking female officer who was there to really call APD when the drunks came in and they started getting out of hand. And poor girl had a long shift, and I knew she was going to have to deal with some belligerent drunks, and so did she. So I came down there, I kind of saw the setup, and just as I was about to head upstairs, I heard this loud cackling laughter, and what do we have? We have these two kunkelheads that are coming back from their time down at 6th Street. And the one thing I noticed immediately was they don't have their bottle of Diesel with them. Because those two knuckleheads had drank up that whole damn bottle. And these guys were staggering in. Now, these were professional drunks. I mean, these guys had drank a lot of stuff in their lives, or else they would have been passed out flat. So these two guys start stumbling in. They go up to the RA table. They're so drunk that they forgot that they didn't register and were supposed to go around to the stairwell and sneak in. So they go up, and the RA knows immediately they're not supposed to be there. She asks them for their IDs. They have no IDs. They have fake IDs, but they ain't fake jester IDs. She asks them if they're on the list. They say, of course we're on the list. Here. She's like, you guys are not on the list. You look very inebriated. I think I'm going to have to ask you to leave. So they start to get a little, rowdy. And so here comes the poor Ut-Put officer. And she comes up and she tells these two guys, look, you guys are not supposed to be here. You look like you're clearly inebriated. If you don't leave, I'm going to have to call the real cops. And these two guys look at each other and just start laughing. And the taller one of them, who's looking down at this poor officer, and she's stepped out of the table so that she's right here and these two guys are right here. They're probably, I don't know, a foot, 2 feet away. And she says, look, you're clearly drunk, and I'm going to have to call UTPD, the Austin Police Department. And the tall guy looks at her and says, you're not going to do that because you don't know how. What? He says, because I know a secret. You want to hear it? You can't spell stupid without UTPD. And just as her face starts to, turn red, where she's literally going to punch this guy, his eyes get big. He looks her in the eye. He looks down at her feet, and he pukes all over her shoes. Her shoes, the upper part of her trousers. And it's not just a little bit. Every single drop of that diesel starts coming out and pukes and puke. I've never seen anyone retch so much. She was so surprised that all she does is sit there with this tall idiot throwing up all over the place. We're talking like a mountain of puke. And then as soon as he's done, he falls over and passes out with a dopey grin on his face. Well, his other friend's so drunk, he's just looking there at the same time. And the poor girl is so angry, pissed, traumatized, everything at the same time. She literally doesn't know what to do for like a full minute. And it's just like everything freezes and stops. And finally, we all start waking up and looking around. And she realizes that she's standing in a mountain of puke. So she steps back, and there's 2 dainty footprints left in this gigantic pile of puke. So, and she's mad because she doesn't have another uniform to change into. She stinks. And now she has to call APD to come get these drunks, take them down, throw them in a drunk tank. And finally, the janitor comes to clean this stuff up. I don't think that janitor ever seen so much puke in his life. Finally cleans that up. And I think those guys, the judge, they stayed in the drunk tank a couple days or something. The judge decided it was punishment enough for how much alcohol poisoning they had. But here was the kicker to the story. The stomach acid from the puke stripped off the top layer that they had coated the cement with. And so what you saw was these 2 dainty footprints in the same place for the rest of the semester. And every time we walked by it, everyone would say, you know what? You can't spell stupid without UTPD.